So this video introduces the investigation that you're going to do to look at what happens when powers have bases that are integers. And so I'm going to go through the instructions, and then what I want you to do is pause in certain places, try it, and then look at your answers. So for part one, what I want you to do is just evaluate each of these. Standard form means what does it equal? Exponential forms means what does it mean as an exponent? Written in as an exponent. One thing I want you to do, notice here, this is -4 in brackets times -4 in brackets, etc. So when you put it in exponential form, so I'm going to give you an example of the first one. When you put it in exponential form, I want you to keep the bracket. And so you're going to write it like that. And then when you actually punch this into your calculator, -4 times -4 times -4 times -4, you're going to get positive 256. So I want you to repeat that for all of these. Again, use brackets. So this one you do bracket -3 to the 5, and so on and so forth. And what I want you to do is answer the questions for part one, and then restart the video and go through to see if you're right or wrong. Okay, so I want you to compare your answers to what is showing here. So again, hopefully you remembered to keep the bracket for each one, and then when you punched into your calculator, you would have gotten these answers. So just double check that your answers are correct. And so when you look at this, you're going to notice that part A and part C, they're both positive, and part B and part D are both negative. And then what I want you to do is look at some of the connections between them. Why do you think that is? Why do you think A and C are positive, whereas B and D are negative? So then it asks you to predict. What do you think about -2 in brackets to the 8? What do you think that will be? Well, if you wrote that out as a repeated multiplication, you're going to do -2 times -2 times -2 repeated 8 times. When you multiply a negative 8 times, you're actually going to end up with a positive answer, because every 2 negatives equals a positive. And so repeating -2 8 times will result in a positive answer. If you look at the next one that asks you to predict, what about -4 to the 3? Well, in this case, it would be -4 times -4 times -4. So that negative is going to repeat 3 times. And when a negative repeats an odd number of times, your answer is going to be negative. So then if you look up here and you look there and you think, okay, let's see if I can figure out a rule. When my exponents are odd, it looks like I'm getting negative answers. And when my exponents are even, it looks like I'm getting positive answers. So when it asks you to sort of make a rule, that's exactly it. When there are brackets and that negative gets repeated over and over again, if the negative gets repeated an odd number of times, meaning that the exponent is odd, your answer will always be negative. And if that negative gets repeated an even number of times, meaning that your exponent is even, then your answer will be positive. So let's look at part 2. So in part 2, it talks about that the base was negative in all of those ones we just did. It was -2 times -2 times -2, etc. And so now it asks you to look at -2 to the 4 without brackets and comparing that to -2 to the 4 with brackets. Do you think that those are the same? Do you think that they're different? Hopefully you're thinking they must be different, otherwise what's the point of having the bracket? So in -2 to the 4 with brackets, as we saw in part 1, that meant -2 times -2 times -2 times -2, and our answer would have been positive 16. But -2 to the 4 without brackets, what that actually means is it means negative times 2 to the 4, or -1 times 2 to the 4. If we follow Bedmiss, we have to do the exponent first. Then we apply the multiplying by -1. So in this case, what it actually is, if we wrote it out as a repeated multiplication, it would be negative times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. The negative sign does not get repeated. Because there are no brackets, that negative sign is not actually part of the base. The negative sign just happens to be in front. It happens to just say, this is -1 times whatever the answer is. So the base of -2 to the 4 without brackets is actually 2, whereas the base of -2 to the 4 with brackets is -2. So if we look down here, this one's going to be the same. It'll be negative and then 4 times 4 times 4. So what's really important is when there are no brackets, the negative sign is not part of the base, therefore it does not repeat. So what I want you to do is fill in the rest of part 2, pause the video, fill it in, then restart the video, see if your answers are correct. So if we look at the answers, what you're going to notice is all of them result in negative answers. The reason for that is the negative sign does not repeat, and so the negative sign only occurs once. So the question, which answers are positive, the answer would be none, and which answers are negative, all of them are. So if we had to predict, what about -2 to the 8 without brackets, what do you think? Well, that one is going to be negative. The reason for that, even though the exponent is 8, it's 2 repeated 8 times with one negative sign. It's not negative repeated 8 times. And so because there's only one negative sign, your answer will be negative. So then what about predicting, -4 to the 3? What about that one without brackets? Again, there's only one negative sign, so your answer will be negative. So it says, what can you conclude about powers that have a negative with no bracket? Well, any power that has a negative in front with no bracket will always be negative. And the reason for that is the negative sign does not repeat. Therefore, there will only be one negative. Therefore, your answer will always be negative. So let's look at the conclusion part. So what do you think about these questions? Pause the video for a second. Fill in what you think is negative, what do you think is positive, and then restart to see if you're right. So what you're going to notice is the first one will be positive. The reason for that is it has brackets. Because it has brackets, that means the negative repeats. But in this case, the negative repeats 2 times, which will result in a positive answer. For part B, the answer is negative. Why is that? Well, because it has no brackets. And when it has no brackets, the negative does not repeat. And there will only be one negative, so that will result in a negative answer. The third one, a little bit tricky. It has brackets. So the negative does repeat, but in this case, because the exponent is a 3, the negative repeats 3 times, which will result in a negative answer. The last one is negative. It has no brackets, which means there's only one negative sign. The negative does not repeat, and it will result in a negative answer. So this next one, what do you think the base of these are? Well, because the first one doesn't have brackets, that means the negative sign is not included. The negative does not repeat. So the base is actually just +2. The next one, because it has brackets, the negative sign will repeat. It will be part of the base. So the base is -3. Likewise for C, the base will be -4 because it had the brackets. And for D, the base will be +5 without brackets. Just the 5 repeats, the negative does not. So this next one here, I want you to see if you can put together what you've learned and come up with the answer for each. Again, pause the video, come up with your answers, compare them, see if you're correct. So for this one here, your answer is +9. The negative sign repeats twice because of the brackets, but because it repeats twice, your answer will be positive. This one will be -64. It does not have brackets, therefore the negative only occurs once. Likewise, this one will be -16. No brackets, the negative only occurs once. For D, there are brackets, so the negative does repeat, but because it repeats 3 times, it will result in a negative answer. For part E, there are no brackets, therefore the negative does not repeat, and it will be -25. F is almost identical to E, but it does have brackets, which means the negative will repeat twice, resulting in a positive answer. G, the answer will be -27. There are no brackets. H, there are brackets, but because the negative repeats 5 times, it will result in a negative answer. So take a moment to let this all sink in. It's not an easy concept to get. There's a lot that you have to think about, but it comes back to breaking it down into repeated multiplication. Always break it down into repeated multiplication. Ask yourself, does the negative repeat or not? If it repeats, then write it out and see how many negative signs you have. That will help you to tell if it's negative or positive. If it does not have brackets, that means the negative does not repeat, and there'll only be one negative, therefore it will always be a negative answer.